first act is to own the podium. And perhaps to also own the fact that after that response, she is a hard act to follow. So I do take that. So much has been said already by the speakers that I'm tempted to say, like Bachilo. But here am I on the podium. I need to do justice to what has been extended to me. And yes, for the better part of this year, whenever I appear in public, and I'm seized by the audience, and I can't help but think, what is it about these spaces where there's 99.999% of us who, if we were true to ourselves and the philosophies that make and unmake us, we could better communicate and relate had we been speaking in our languages. It is a problem. It is a problem that we are here 99.999% and still we find it so easy. And I would like to borrow from Dr. Gagata, who said at the summer school that we were given time, so who said that at the summer school that that's not how we were raised. These are habits that we adopted in the places that sought to reshape us. And it remains a problem that we do not question them. But then I also look at myself and I think, would I do justice to the scholarly academic conversation had I now to start speaking in Sizulu? So it is a conundrum, one that I hope to traverse as I grow in my being, not so much in the academy. So, yes, I was gonna plead for justice for us. Program director, fellow panelists, fellow Africans, Sianibona. Sianibona, the people in me see the people in you. And more than anything, we see the people that sit, no Mama Mbeki, as she sits there, and all the leadership that is amongst us, as we all are leaders in our own right. I have titled this conversation, Conceptual Fidelity is a Decolonial Act. The black woman does not exist. Please allow me to push the envelope further. I speak against the grain as I promised to, because my journeys have taken me to spaces that have asked me questions that do not emanate so much from the slave ship. We entered the slave ship figuratively and literally, being Africans, and we left the plantation as blacks. So as Fanon laments, he says we have been over-determined from without. And it cannot be the nature of our struggle to function from a place of over-determination from without. We perforce, for the sake of generations to come, need to extricate ourselves from these discourses that have seized us and from which we have arrived and not taken as places of departure. I want to say that in my journeys, I was also once a feminist. I had to unlearn being a feminist. Feminism for me was not a place of arrival. It was a place of departure. And from there, I was forced to ask questions that are fundamental to the struggle that I want to wage with my body, with my spirit, with my being, with my talents, with my intellect, with my time. And I say that to you today, those struggles do not start in the slave ship. That struggle also does not start at the plantation as a black woman. It begins before the slave ship. So one of the lessons that I was able to retain in my indoctrination at the university, and yes, we have agreed since the Follis movement that we have been taught ignorance. Yeah? Yeah? So one of the lessons I was able to retain, not many, don't be fooled by the PhD, was that it matters who your audience is. And so we are a small, intimate group, and I'm gonna greet you again and say, Sanibonani. And from that point of view, I will ask you, what is freedom to you? Is it freedom as conceived in the Constitution, which some have called unconstitutional, by the way? Or does freedom to you emanate from the soil, the land? What happens when we firmly position ourselves on the African soil as African women? What kind of questions do we then ask? And this is going to be my conversation with you today. I make a qualitative and thus philosophical distinction between freedom as envisaged by a black woman in South Africa and freedom as envisaged by an African woman on African soil. I position myself in the latter as I take my cue from the use of Afrika in the broader theme of this conversation, which I take not as frivolous and meaningless, but one that is full of meaning, and I want to be faithful to the promises and the horizons that this pregnant positioning in Afrika enjoins us to dwell in. Let us hold this meaning together for this conversation as we seek to confront and disrupt the easy positioning that feminism allows us. It allows us. We are visitors in this concept. And I will elaborate on that further. Afrocentricity enjoins us and helps us to fully perceive African concepts, symbols, voices, and institutions in their own right, not as appendages or secondary filters of other worldviews. And as such, we posit that the ways that we as Africans perceive the universe are as valid as any other. Imperialism left us with two major experiences, that of denying us our African identity. It was, I think, in this room where we were taught that we have been everything else other than African, because claiming and proclaiming to be African really relates us to the question of the land. And no one wants to contend with that. And the second dilemma or major experience that imperialism left us with is that of imposing Western thoughts and cultural realities and perspectives upon us. I want us to begin perhaps to hold those in contention. Another lesson I retained at the university was about gender, which I was taught by white women whose privileged ignorance and arrogance sought to clone me in their image. I can say that feminism was not a place of arrival for me. It was always a place of departure. It was theory in practice. From that came other ways of thinking. I shall quote from Jane. I knew that the term feminism was contested and that I did not like how it fit into my mouth. It was uncomfortable and scratchy, almost like a foreign substance that I was being forced to consume as the white women continued to smile with comforting looks of familiarity and pride. I close the quote. And I'm gonna say, what is this familiarity? They see themselves in me. They see me waging their struggle without me knowing that I am a project. And more than that I'm being cloned in their image. I have heard, and we have heard even today in this forum, as you most probably have heard, this notion that our foremothers were practicing feminism long before even the concept came in vogue. I take issue with that. For not every struggle or act of struggle waged by women necessarily falls under the easy positioning of feminism. That is exactly my point by titling this conversation, that we need conceptual fidelity. We need conceptual clarity. What do we talk about when we talk about decolonization? What do we talk about when we talk about transformation? What do we talk about when we talk about decolonial feminism? For me, those terms sit very awkwardly side by side. It's that thing in the mouth. And I argue that it is important that we have this conceptual fidelity, because any struggle, conceptual fidelity is important in any struggle because it tells us what are the horizons and parameters that are being fought for. I would like to propose that our foremothers were doing something more than feminism. They were waging a struggle that goes beyond individual rights, individual interests. This does not mean that individual rights and interests were not part of the equation. For we understand as Africans that to have a healthy community, we have to have healthy individuals. Hence the whole ethos that sought to support the mana in each one of us, the light that each one of us hold that we were given by a divine spirit, that which sought to illuminate our way, and that divinity is not always gendered. To underscore my point, I want to take you to that TV series that is titled When We Were Black. You know it? When We Were Black. When it begins, it firmly situates us in Soweto with smoke and the train as quintessential tropes of blackness. Do you know? The train and the smoke and the matchboxes and the RDP houses. That makes us black. That makes us oppressed, like Dikeledi is gonna tell us. And I want to take you to the figure portrayed by Jerry Mofokeng wa Makgetha, which stayed with me. He was a teacher. He was a teacher and he was with his family. He had all the trappings of middle class living. And I'm not sure where they were going to, and they were stopped at a roadblock, and at the roadblock, a young Afrikaner guy said to him, "Can you play monkey?" And he said, "No, but I'm a better black, I'm educated, I'm a teacher." But the young Afrikaner guy knew better. He knew that he is of dispossessed people without territory or history or right. And finally, the certificate that Jerry, or whoever he was called then, was not enough to give him the humanity that was taken from him long ago through the line of the human. So the line of the human for me says that I cannot be a feminist. So Jerry was properly overdetermined from without, and he had to mimic being a monkey, teacher or no teacher. And he lamented, you know, the embarrassment and the shame that came with his family seeing him mimicking, you know, the monkey. So if gender is socially constructed and as such can be attributed to the history and context that begot it, and as such it should and can be attributed back, gender is not always a primary organizing principle. Whatever we think, again, we were taught ignorance, other ways of knowing and other ways of being and other ways of relating. So the wars that we wage should not always be gender wars. And I argue that when we wage gender wars, we are in fact taking the struggles which are not ours and really fighting them to the best of our ability. Oyironke Oyiwomi really liberated us here at Unisa when she was here, when she very uncritically says the Yorubas do not do gender, and goes into a whole exposition of why gender cannot be thought as a universal construct. For the fact that it is constructed at a particular place in time, it means that it cannot be used everywhere as though it is not, it does not belong to place in time. So my fundamental intervention tonight is to say that as we ask questions, let us keep in mind that asking questions for the sake of it will take us to a cul-de-sac. We are in it in South Africa today. As we all know, we are in a cul-de-sac, whether we like it or not. Where still, if we ask questions that are not of our own, we do other people's work. We use our voices and talents to articulate other people's world-making and reasoning. For a struggle without a theory is a doomed one. Where still, one that is informed by a wrong philosophy is a dangerous one. I argue that feminism cannot be redeemed, no matter its many permutations, whether it be black, whether it be radical, whether it be Marxist, or whether it be casserole, I don't care. For the fact that it was conceived by people who are particularly placed in time against other people, it says that, and I'm going to say that, as Hudson Wims says, that the quest to name and not be named is an important symbolic struggle, as we understand that a definition belongs to the definer and never to the defined. The aspirations and agendas of the defined can only hope for accommodation in this definition. All knowledge is political. Feminism is a political tool. And should we contend with the many politics that are included in it, perhaps we will begin to ask different questions. And yes, I'll use a cliche and say, can we use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house? How foolish can we be? That is exactly an exercise in futility. So, I'm going to skip a lot of things, but I'm gonna go back to say that in African philosophy, a woman is not pitted against men. In African philosophy, we do not dabble in the us versus them, because we acknowledge and we celebrate fluidity, complementarity. We acknowledge and celebrate making in community. And for that reason, I'm going to say that it is not our philosophy to insist on and underline the differences between men and women. Rather, we emphasize working together to complement each other for the good of the community. Our African philosophies do not put down women. When we say, oh, mama, mama yo, when you're dying, you die and say, mama yo, a big man who is accomplished in his own right, in pain, in the throes of pain, when his very humanity is being questioned, he does not say baba yo. He says mama yo, which says to me that umama for us is a symbol of strength and all that is good and nurturing and life-giving. When we say that ugogo, even our ancestors we call ugogo, because they have knowledges that we don't have, and we seek those knowledges. Even men bow and say, now we are going to call ugogo. When we say umagazi, we see this woman of power. In our languages is found, is embodied the philosophy about who woman is. When we say rakadi, again, when we say makazi, we know that she's a diviner and a kingmaker and a king destroyer. Again. So, and then we go on to say mangwana uitwara ka moy eleng bohale ka teng. Again, because we know that she's got the agility. We know that she's got the wisdom. We know that she's got the love. We know that she's got the power. We know that she's got the foresight to so our philosophies don't give us this gender wars. The gender wars come from a particular place in time in Europe between people who were particularly positioned vis-a-vis each other. So Runa we come because because in African philosophy, woman is not necessarily a default to a referent man. Woman is woman in her own right. And to say that black women, black men, African men don't have power. But guy, you don't have power. When the line of the human was conceptualized, it was not with you in mind. What you have is pseudo power that you seek to use over us. But you don't have power. And so for that reason, I say to fellow sisters that, you know what, they don't have power. And the genesis of our ills cannot be solely attributed to them. And so when we blame them for everything that is, I think we are losing sight of the struggles that we are supposed to wage. And I want to contend that if the black man is healthy and whole, then it follows that the black woman will be healthy and whole. For the fact that we embody pain, for the fact that we are pained by our men who are supposed to protect and be in community with us, it means that something has gone fundamentally wrong. African men are effeminized, we know. About John, when we are the Josephines in the kitchen. So the power that African men that we seek from them and we fight them for, really they don't have. But more than that, when we spend all our energies fighting these men who have no power but have something that looks like power, then we are losing the real struggle. So I want to say as I conclude that African woman is God. She gives power for the good of the community. That we are injured and we embody pain, that our personal does indeed reflect the political, is not up for discussion. That is taken for granted. What is up for granted is what is the political that we ought to resist against? What forces oppress African women? At what point do African women become black women? Do we ask questions? Do we resist? Do we dream? Or do we breastfeed? And do we breastfeed our children as African women? Or do we do that as black women? What does it all mean? What victories, even for our children's children, do we fight for when we position ourselves as African women? When we become Abonehanda, when we become Bomantsopa, when we become Abomkabaigachama, or Asantiwa, Bomantatisi of our time, when we are not over-determined from outside, when our souls are not those of black folks, when we are not committing suicide. Thank you very much.